Ontario es una de las provincias más importantes de Canadá desde el punto de vista económico, quizás la más importante, lo ha sido desde la fundación de la Federación Canadiense. Tuve la oportunidad, de hecho, de vivir en Toronto, en Ontario, durante 3 años. Le tengo un apego fundamental a esta provincia y a ese país, por supuesto. Pero Ontario tiene también mucho que enseñarnos a México, tiene que enseñarnos en materia económica y en otros temas. Para mí es un privilegio que tenga yo la oportunidad de hablar con la Primera Ministra de Ontario, Kathleen Wynne, y bueno, vamos a hacer la conversación en inglés para que usted pueda escucharla directamente y vamos a utilizar subtítulos para que pueda usted leerla en español. Honorable Prime Minister, it's a pleasure for me to speak to you this morning.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, Sergio. Thank you.
Tell us about Ontario. Ontario is a province that has actually evolved quite rapidly. I used to live there in the 1970s, but every time I go back, I'm surprised at the level of prosperity, the level of technology. How has Ontario managed to change so rapidly?
So Ontario is, as you say, the biggest province in Canada, 13.5 million people, and we have many traditional industries. I'm here in Mexico to foster partnerships and build bridges, if I can say, with Mexico
Bridges
and Ontario.
Not walls.
Bridges, not walls. Yeah, because we benefit mutually from shared investment and shared businesses. So I'm also here because of the Climate Summit of the Americas. So our partnership on climate change is very important. We can come back to that. But
yes,
one of the things Ontario has done over the last decades is really build our education system. We have a highly educated population. About 70% of people in Ontario have post-secondary education. And so we've drawn investment to Ontario because of that. And traditional industries like agriculture, like the auto sector, have advanced in Ontario because of that educated workforce and our capacity to innovate. And actually, innovation and investment in startup companies and scale-up companies, we're competing with Silicon Valley in terms of the number of startup companies, and that's been a real focus of ours in the last 10 years to make an imprint, make an impact on the global economy.
What surprises me is that some states in the United States neighboring Ontario, which are part of the Rust Belt, haven't been able to move forward from manufacturing to technology manufacturing or to new kinds of economic activity. But it was possible, and Ontario, I think, has managed to show that.
Yes, and we have a very diversified economy. So all our eggs, if I can say, are not in one basket, you know? So we have an aerospace industry. We have, as I say, a clean tech industry. We have 900 companies that are in water high tech. And we've fostered those industries and promoted them and helped them to innovate. And the government has partnered with them. You know, I'm in politics because I believe government has a role to play to improve people's lives and to support the economy, create the conditions. So we've made investments in infrastructure. We have partnered with companies and helped them to expand and help them to advance.
It's become fashionable to decry NAFTA. What's your position on NAFTA?
Well, I believe very much, Sergio, that it is in all of our best interests for our borders to be open, for us to increase our ability to trade freely and to take advantage of each other's markets. You know, I've had the opportunity to meet with a number of businesses here in Mexico that have plants in Ontario, that are creating jobs in Ontario, and vice versa. And we've done that under NAFTA. We've done that because we've agreed on this continent that free trade is what we should be doing. And I think anyone who believes now that closing borders is what we should be doing and pretending that we don't live in a global economy is making a huge mistake. The biggest example of that is the work that we're doing on climate change together. You know, we cannot pretend that we can solve the problems associated with climate change state by state or province by province or even country by country. We have to work together. And so the fact that we've been able to sign 2 memorandum of understanding here in Mexico, one with Jalisco and one with Mexico and Quebec, that we are working to put a price on carbon to implement cap and trade. Mexico is already doing a pilot with 60 companies. We will begin in March of 2017 with our first auction. That's the kind of cooperation that is going to solve global challenges, including economic challenge.
I went to school in an Ontario that was very conservative, that rejected everyone who is different, either immigrants or just foreigners in general, and certainly gay people. And when I go back to Toronto, especially Toronto nowadays, I see a totally open society. Gay marriage is accepted. There's a debate in Mexico right now about gay marriage. What's your position? Although since I know a little bit about you, I guess I can guess what your position is.
Well, and yes, I live with a woman. I'm married to a woman, and we were married in 2005, but we've lived together since about 1990. You know, for me, being an inclusive, pluralistic society, which is what we are in Ontario, you're right. Over the last 35 years, there have been many, many changes. But we pride ourselves in Canada and in Ontario on being inclusive, on welcoming people to our society, and that includes people who live a different lifestyle, who have a different sexual orientation. And I believe, Sergio, that being inclusive, you know, you were talking about how has Ontario advanced. I think by being inclusive and having everyone at the table and sharing those life experiences and not excluding people because they live differently or because they have a different color skin or they speak a different language, but bringing everyone in and capitalizing on their strengths and assets, I think that is what has helped us to move ahead as quickly as we have, because it takes down barriers for people to be involved, and therefore you have access to all of the brilliance of the whole population.
I understand you went into politics because of education. Is this true?
Yes, it's true. I have 3 children, and now I have 3 grandchildren, and I have a master's of education, so I was predisposed to be focused on education.
You also have a master's in linguistics, don't you?
I do have a master's in linguistics as well. Yes,
U of T,
from U of T,
University
that's
of Toronto, yeah.
That's right. And I was very focused on publicly funded education because, again, I believe that it is our strength. I believe that the fact that we have a very equitable education system in Ontario, we now have students who start at age 4 in a full-day kindergarten program right through to grade 12. We have a graduation rate in Ontario from secondary school of about 85.5%. And so the importance of publicly funded education in providing a level playing field for people no matter their background. And you can go anywhere in Ontario and find excellent teachers and excellent resources. So having that as a constant in our democracy, I think, again, has been one of the building blocks for us. So I got involved at a time when, from my perspective, another party was in office in Ontario, and they were threatening that publicly funded education system. And it still remains for me a very important focus, and as I say, a cornerstone of our strength as a democracy.
How difficult is it to be a prime minister, a provincial prime minister in Canada? It's a very difficult country. People have a hard time understanding it unless they've actually lived there. You have the Quebec culture, totally different, and you've had actually a couple of referenda in which Quebecers tried to separate from the rest of Canada. Is it difficult? Is it easy to deal with other provincial governments and with the federal government in Canada?
Well, I think the story of Canada is that there's always been some tension in the federation, you know, and I see that as healthy tension, because what it means is we have to work together and we have to find compromises. Every time I sit down with my colleague premiers, we are having a conversation about how do we give a little here and take a little there, and how do we find a way to meet everyone's needs, because our geography is different depending on the province. You're right, the history is different. We are a bilingual country, so we have a francophonie and the anglophonie, and then now in Ontario, in my own jurisdiction, there are more than 100 languages that are spoken. So we have people from all over the world, and then the fundamental building blocks of the country are the First Nations people, the Indigenous people, the
First Nations is fine once we define it.
Indigenous people, English and French. Those are the founding nations. But we're constantly renegotiating those agreements.
Is that why you don't have racial violence in Canada the way you do in the U.S. or even in Europe right now?
Well, I think there are lots of reasons for that, but I think that you're right. Our pluralism and our understanding that apart from our Indigenous people, we all came from somewhere else, and that it is our responsibility to find a way to work together, that it's in the best interests of all of us to do that. And we have, it's interesting, we have a Prime Minister now in Justin Trudeau who really understands that having a federal government work with the provincial governments makes everything work much, much better. And we haven't always had that.
He's also a member of your party.
He's a member of my party, and when we have that alignment, it makes the federation work much better. I will also say that going back to the public education discussion, I believe that having a strong public education system that acknowledges difference, because we have so many people from so many different places, and they find their place in the public education system. The differences are celebrated. Obviously, our Canadian values are celebrated, but we don't ask people to come to our country and forget who they are. We ask people to come and be part of creating a new Canada, as we evolve.
A mosaic?
A mosaic, yeah, that is what it has been called. I see it as yes, a beautiful jigsaw puzzle of people who with different shapes and different backgrounds,
who can remain
finding
different.
a new way, and who can remain different, but work together and create a new reality.
Honorable Prime Minister Kathleen Wynne, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you very much. It's my honor.
Y a usted, amigo televidente, que hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se lo olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.